Look at yourself in the mirror. You're fat and completely out of style. The brutal words spat out by her husband froze the air in the bedroom. For 20 years, she had put herself last, dedicating everything to her family, only to be hit with this cruel insult. But at that moment, her husband had no idea. He didn't realize that the wife he was throwing away like trash would, in just 1 year, become the person he would have to bow down to the most. Nor did he know that this verbal abuse would be the biggest mistake of his life, plunging him into absolute rock bottom. It was past 1 in the afternoon. In the bedroom of their Chicago suburban home, Maya Foster stood before the full-length mirror. She had pulled out a dress from the very back of her closet. Next week, she was expected to accompany her husband, Kevin, to a business dinner. Wanting to at least look presentable as his wife, Maya had tried on an old favorite outfit. But looking at her reflection, she let out a small sigh. Her body was clearly different from her younger days. Her skin was dull and tired, lacking proper care. She hadn't been to a hair salon in ages, simply tying her hair back into a single ponytail. 20 years ago, when she worked as a product planner at a fashion brand in downtown Chicago, she took pride in her work. She was vibrant and took care of herself. But that version of her was nowhere to be found. Ever since they got married, Maya's life had always revolved around her family. Kevin was frequently relocated for work. Each time she scrambled to adapt to a new city, handling the stress of packing and moving. She took care of his aging parents, managing his mother's hospital paperwork and nursing care. Any money she could have spent on clothes or makeup for herself went toward buying sharp suits and ties for Kevin, who worked on the front lines as an account director at a major advertising agency. Any free time she had went into scrubbing the house so he could relax, preparing warm meals, and waiting for him to come home. Her former boss used to highly praise her color sense and her ability to design clothing that truly understood women, repeatedly offering her a chance to return to work. But Maya declined every offer for the sake of her family. I have to support him, she believed, putting herself at the very bottom of her priority list. And yet, what she heard from behind her was not a word of gratitude or appreciation, but a cold, mocking voice. It's honestly embarrassing to walk next to you. Kevin sat on the edge of the bed, his eyes glued to his smartphone, delivering the words ruthlessly. Maya's chest stung. I'm sorry, it's a little tight, isn't it? Maya tried to laugh it off, pushing down her emotions to avoid making waves, just as she had done for years. But Kevin showed no mercy, driving the blade deeper. You're completely past your prime. Can't you put at least a little effort into your appearance? Look at Chloe. Younger girls just have a certain glow. You're a lost cause compared to her. Chloe. That was Chloe Davis, a junior account executive at Kevin's agency. It was a name Kevin had been bringing up frequently at home lately. She's young and brilliant. She's so attentive. The room brightens up when she's around. Every time her husband praised another woman while comparing her to Maya, she bled silently. Still, she put on a fake smile and agreed. But today, Kevin was different. He tossed his phone onto the bed and casually opened the drawer of the nightstand. He pulled out a single stack of paper and thrust it right in front of Maya's face. It was a set of divorce papers. Maya held her breath, staring at the documents. I deserve a woman who suits me better, Kevin said, making no effort to hide his intentions. He looked down at Maya with a thin smile, his eyes holding the same look one might give when throwing out garbage. I want to end this life walking next to you. I'm an account director now. The woman standing beside me needs to look the part. I'm done with a fat, frumpy woman like you. With just a few words about her appearance, he discarded 20 years of devotion. The room fell dead silent. Normally, a wife might scream and cry here. She might yell, "Who do you think I aged this much for?" Or perhaps she would cling to him, begging him not to throw her away. However, Maya's reaction completely betrayed Kevin's expectations. Maya didn't cry. She didn't yell. She didn't even accuse him of having an affair with Chloe. She simply and quietly took the dress she was holding, put it on a hanger, and picked up the pen resting on the dresser. Then, with a hand that didn't shake at all, she signed her name on the divorce papers without a second of hesitation. I understand. That was all she said. Kevin's face twitched slightly, as if the wind had been knocked out of his sails. For a man who was certain of a total victory, this was far too anticlimactic. But he quickly covered his awkwardness with a scoff. Humph. You really don't have anything to say, do you? A boring, plain woman right to the bitter end. Maya didn't answer. Words would never reach this man, not in a lifetime. It was pointless to say anything more to a person who never once considered how hard she managed the household budget without buying clothes, how she skipped the hair salon to pay for his parents' medical bills, or the pain she felt giving up her own career. That night, Maya packed only her essential belongings into a small suitcase and quietly left the house she had lived in for 20 years. Her ex-husband's snoring from the bedroom felt strangely distant. The cool Chicago night wind chilled her flushed cheeks. Yet, Maya's steps were somehow light. It was a bizarre sensation, as if the heavy chains that had bound her for 2 decades had just snapped off. Why did she step away so easily without arguing back? In the eyes of a woman who had seemingly lost everything, there was no color of despair. Tomorrow, Maya would reunite with someone, and that encounter would quietly but dramatically set her frozen time back into motion. Kevin was in a fantastic mood. On the afternoon following the divorce, he sat in a high-end hotel lounge with a great view of the Chicago skyline, facing Chloe Davis. 24-year-old Chloe was his junior at work, and now, proudly sitting beside him as his girlfriend. Wearing a bright, soft dress, she had a glamorous aura that made everyone turn their heads. "Did your wife really not say anything?" Chloe let out a giggle while stirring her iced tea with a straw. "Yeah, I thought she'd cry and beg, but she was completely flat. She packed her bags and left last night." Kevin picked up his coffee cup, answering proudly. "I guess she knew it herself, right? That she's no longer a match for you, Kevin?" "Exactly. She's always been like that. No matter what she wears, she looks plain. She has no idea how much I have to care about public perception as a director at an ad agency." Kevin had no doubt that he was the ultimate winner. He had secured the young, beautiful Chloe and discarded his useless wife. His life from now on would only be more glorious. Chloe, too, was drowning in a superiority complex, convinced she was the chosen woman. She had beaten a plain, middle-aged housewife with her youth and beauty, but they were completely oblivious. Maya had stayed silent not because she lacked confidence or felt pathetic. It was simply because she had given up on trying to use words to make a husband understand a husband who had refused to truly look at her for 20 years. Meanwhile, at a quiet corner cafe in the city, Maya sat across from her best friend from high school, Michelle Turner. As soon as Michelle saw Maya arrive at the meeting spot, she lost her words. Even after sitting down, Michelle remained silent for several minutes. "Michelle?" Maya called out anxiously, her voice trembling slightly. "Why are you staring at me like that?" Maya was confused by the sudden silence. "Do I look that terrible?" Maya laughed awkwardly, gently touching her own cheek. "I guess I'm just tired from leaving the house so suddenly. Kevin laughed at me yesterday, too. He called me overweight and frumpy." The words her ex-husband had showered her with still pierced her chest. She assumed she must look like a miserable old woman to anyone who saw her. As Maya looked down, Michelle firmly shook her head. "No." Michelle leaned forward and tightly grasped Maya's slightly rough hands with both of hers. "You didn't get fat. You didn't become ugly. Forget about what a man like that says. You just put yourself last for the sake of others for 20 years. Those words sank straight to the bottom of Maya's heart. Put myself last. Yes, every time Kevin was transferred, she sacrificed her own life. She took on all the care for his parents. The money to buy her own clothes, the time to go to the salon. She used it all for the family. Tears suddenly spilled from Michelle's eyes. "You aren't broken. You just took a break from living for yourself." In that instant, the back of Maya's eyes burned. The pain that no one had understood for 20 years, the pain her husband had refused to even acknowledge, Michelle saw right through it in a single second. Maya had been constantly told she was past her prime, and her mind, which had started to believe it, slowly began to thaw. Her forced smile crumbled, and large tears overflowed from her eyes. Once Maya had calmed down a bit, Michelle pulled an envelope from her purse. "This was sent to your parents' house." When Maya took it, she saw it was an invitation to their 20-year high school reunion being held next year. "I'm one of the organizers, Maya. You don't have to run away. You can come exactly as you are now. Hold your head high. Aside from the reunion, I have one more thing to tell you. Claire asked me to have you contact her." Claire Sterling. She was Maya's former boss at the fashion company she used to work for. Maya looked up in surprise. "Why would Claire want to talk to me?" "Your planning skills, your color sense, and your talent for understanding the heart of the person wearing the clothes. Claire still highly values you. She's asked you to come back multiple times, hasn't she?" Maya stared at her small bag resting on the table. Inside, it was a stack of old fabric swatches she had unconsciously grabbed when leaving the house. Color, texture, The cut of a collar, the drop of a shoulder. Every time she touched them, her heart used to race. That true version of herself, sealed deep inside by her husband's cold words and the heavy pressure of household duties for 20 years, was now trying to wake up with a faint sound. She had decided never to return to the side of a husband who treated her like garbage. But the void of 20 years was still overwhelmingly heavy. What could a woman, laughed at by her husband as fat and tacky, possibly achieve? Was there really a place left for her in the industry that once recognized her talent? Just as Maya opened her mouth to speak, the cafe door chime rang with a crisp sound. The wind blowing in from outside slightly fluttered the reunion invitation on the table. It felt like a premonition of the new, turbulent waves she was about to face. A few days later, Maya visited a boutique design studio in Chicago's trendy West Loop. Sitting across from her was her former boss, Claire Sterling. Claire stared intently at Maya's face. It wasn't a look of pity. It was the sharp gaze of a professional seeing through to the core of the person in front of her. Maya, you have a good face now. Yes, you aren't just the girl with good taste from 20 years ago. The woman you are today has the depth of someone who knows real pain. Maya was bewildered. Just days ago, she had been laughed at as a lost cause and easily discarded. Every time she looked in the mirror, she had turned away from her dull skin and changing body. She had lost her confidence ages ago. Claire slid a business proposal across the table. I'm launching a new brand for mature women. The target demographic is women struggling with their age and body changes. Women who are starting to give up on themselves. I want to put you in charge of designing this project. Me? But I've been away from the industry for 20 years. Look at me. My ex-husband laughed at me for being a fat, frumpy old woman. That's exactly why, Claire stated firmly. You know that pain better than anyone. There are clothes that young, skinny designers can never create. Clothes not for hiding, but for making a woman fall in love with herself again. You can make those clothes. The 20 years you lived for others were absolutely not a waste. At those words, Maya felt something that had been frozen deep in her chest begin to radiate heat. The 20 years lived for others were not a waste. That single sentence saved Maya's soul more than anything else could. That weekend, Maya returned to her former condo to pack the rest of her belongings. She had already informed Kevin, but when she unlocked the front door, the sickly sweet smell of perfume hit her nose. Cheerful voices echoed from the living room. Oh, this is so cute. Can I put this here? Sure. I was going to throw out my ex's junk anyway. It was Kevin and Chloe. When Maya stepped into the living room, the two turned around without a hint of guilt. The apartment was already shifting to Chloe's flashy interior tastes. Strangers' belongings were carelessly tossed on the floors Maya had polished every single day for 2 decades. What, you still have stuff left? Kevin leaned back on the sofa, looking annoyed. Chloe looked Maya up and down, taking in her plain clothes, and let out a snicker. Nice to meet you. I'm Chloe Davis. Kevin's been taking very good care of me. Despite her polite words, her eyes looked down on Maya completely. I'm younger and more beautiful. I'm the one who was chosen. The superiority of a winner oozed from her entire body. Maya said nothing. She headed to her room and packed the remaining items into a cardboard box. Inside were the proposal for the new brand Claire had given her, and a sketchbook filled with design notes Maya had kept. As she tried to carry the box through the living room, Kevin and Chloe's conversation caught her ear. By the way, Kevin, you're aiming to get the ad campaign for that new brand launching soon, right? Yeah. The target is supposedly middle-aged women, but it's making a huge buzz in the industry. Rumor has it a genius young designer is spearheading the project. Kevin swirled his wine glass proudly. If our agency snags that account, my stock as an account director will skyrocket. It's always young talent that defines an era, after all. Maya's feet stopped. At that moment, her grip slipped, and the sketchbook resting on top of the box fell to the floor. With a slap, papers covered in clothing designs scattered across the rug. Kevin saw it and scoffed. What's that? Don't tell me you're planning to design clothes at your age. Chloe covered her mouth, stifling a laugh. Kevin, please stop. She's just trying desperately to figure out her life. It's just a hobby. Kevin stood up and poked one of the fallen design sheets with the tip of his shoe. Give it up. Who would ever wear clothes made by a plain woman like you? In this world, image is everything. Someone like you, who neglected the effort to polish herself, will never amount to anything anyway. 20 years of devoting everything to her husband were dismissed as neglecting effort. Normally, anger would explode here. but Maya quietly gathered the scattered papers. She stood up and looked Kevin straight in the eye. You might be right. Image might be important. Kevin nodded triumphantly. Exactly. That's why I chose Chloe. Clutching the sketchbook to her chest, Maya spoke quietly. But a person's worth isn't determined solely by how they look walking next to someone else. Her calm voice made Kevin flinch for a second. The wife who had always laughed awkwardly and apologized no matter what he said was finally talking back. What did you say? Maya no longer looked at him with fearful eyes. She offered a slight, quiet bow. Thank you for everything. Enjoy your new life. Leaving only those words, Maya walked out of the condo. She heard Kevin yelling something from behind, but her feet didn't stop. In her hands, she tightly gripped the proposal entrusted to her by Claire. From here, Maya's true life would begin. But Kevin still had no idea. He had no idea that the very designs he had kicked and mocked were the exact genius young talent he was desperately trying to get his hands on. If we highlight the insecurities of middle-aged women, this brand will be a massive hit. In Claire's quiet design studio, a loud, overly confident male voice echoed. In the back workroom, where Maya was organizing fabric samples, she reflexively stopped her hands. There was no mistake. It was Kevin's voice. Why was he here? Maya held her breath and peeked into the reception room through a crack in the door. Through the sleek glass partition, she saw Kevin in a sharp suit enthusiastically presenting a proposal to Claire Sterling. Sitting next to him was his new girlfriend, Chloe. Kevin's advertising agency was aggressively pitching to win the marketing campaign for Claire's new brand. Of course, Kevin had no idea that the lead designer of this brand was the very ex-wife he had recently thrown away for being fat and tacky. Your new target audience is women over 40, correct? They're struggling with body changes and aging, Kevin continued his pitch with his resonant, practiced sales voice. Therefore, what we propose is a campaign that intensely triggers their desire for youth. We'll intentionally cast a 20-something, skinny, beautiful model, Claire asked quietly, her expression unchanging. Why is that? Kevin smiled smugly and tapped the documents in front of him. Women past 40, whose bodies have changed, don't want to look at reality. It sounds harsh, but they're people who neglected the effort to improve themselves and gave up on being women. Chloe, sitting beside him, nodded in agreement and let out a small laugh. That's so true. People like that just desperately cling to clothes, hoping for some magic trick to make them look better. Exactly. Kevin took over. They lack self-discipline. That's why we show them a young, beautiful model to give them the illusion, if you wear this, you can look like this too. If we stoke their insecurities and trigger their inferiority complexes, they'll absolutely open their wallets. In the back room, Maya's heart let out an awful, heavy thump. Her palms grew cold, and she unconsciously gripped the soft fabric in her hands tightly. Actually, I recently divorced my wife, Kevin said, making Maya gasp. My ex-wife was the exact embodiment of this target demographic. She used housework and taking care of my parents as an excuse to completely stop caring about her appearance. She got bloated, and her clothes were hideous. It was genuinely embarrassing to walk next to her. She spectacularly threw away her womanhood. The air in the reception room turned freezing cold, but Kevin, drunk on his own speech, didn't notice. It's useless to be gentle and accommodating to lazy women like her. You have to shove reality in their faces and shock them. With a soft, love yourself as you are concept like you're proposing, the merchandise will never sell. Maya's vision swayed. For 20 years, she had given up her career to follow Kevin's endless transfers. When his mother collapsed, Maya went to the hospital every single day to change her clothes and care for her. She slashed the grocery budget and endured not buying a single dress for herself, all so she could polish Kevin's suits and shoes so he wouldn't be embarrassed at work. The days of putting herself last for her family. In her husband's eyes, she was nothing more than a lazy woman who used chores and sick parents as an excuse. Maya bit her lip hard. Even as she bit down until it bled, she couldn't suppress the dark emotions rising from the depths of her chest. It wasn't sadness. It was just a profound sense of unfairness and absolute frustration. In the reception room, Claire was fixing Kevin with an icy glare. So, Director Foster, you believe that our brand's customers are lazy, sloppy women who have neglected their efforts? Yes. To speak bluntly, that's exactly why they need to be pulled up by our sophisticated advertising. A deep silence fell. Claire didn't even touch the proposal on the table. She just stared right through Kevin. Please leave. The smug smiles froze on Kevin and Chloe's faces. Excuse me? Is there something you're unsatisfied with? Our core philosophies are fundamentally incompatible. Claire's voice was low, but cold as ice. Our brand won't engage in cheap tactics that sell clothes by stoking women's insecurities. And we absolutely cannot work with someone who laughs at the precious, honorable time women spend, putting themselves last for the sake of their families and lives, calling it laziness. Kevin's face instantly flushed red. But our solid strategy based on data. Please go home, and don't ever come back. Faced with Claire's resolute attitude, Kevin's face twisted in humiliation. Chloe also had her eyes wide, looking at Claire like she was crazy. Kevin slammed his hand on the table and stood up roughly. You'll regret this. There's no way a business built on such naive, sweet ideas for old women will ever succeed. It's just a pity party for losers. Leaving that parting threat behind, Kevin stomped out of the reception room with Chloe in tow. The heavy door slammed shut, echoing through the quiet studio. Claire slowly stood up and opened the door to the back workroom. There, standing pale and trembling while clutching a piece of fabric, was Maya. You heard him, Maya. Maya gave a small nod. That man laughed at your 20 years, calling you lazy. There are people in this world who look down on the pain of others like that. People who measure a person's worth entirely by their surface appearance. Claire gently took the fabric from Maya's trembling hands. It was a high-quality silk fabric Maya had chosen, one that would softly complement aging skin. Are you frustrated? At Claire's question, a single tear rolled down Maya's cheek. It was the first tear she had shed for herself in 20 years. I'm frustrated, Maya's voice shook. I wasn't slacking off. I didn't throw away my womanhood. I was just trying so hard to survive. Why do I have to be laughed at like that? Claire pulled Maya in and hugged her shoulders tightly. Then prove it. Not with words, but with the clothes you create. Those powerful words resonated deep into Maya's core. Kevin thought he had won. He believed that by securing his good looks and a young mistress, he was the ultimate winner in life. But they had no idea. They didn't know how many women's hearts the clothes Maya was about to create would save, nor what kind of massive sensation they would cause. Maya wiped her tears and lifted her head. The woman who shrank back at her husband's words was gone. In her eyes, the light of a fierce new resolve had taken root. At 2:00 a.m., in Maya's newly rented small studio apartment, only the monotonous hum of a sewing machine echoed. Under the dim lighting, she was wrestling with countless pieces of fabric. On her desk sat a mountain of crumpled design sketches that had been drawn and thrown away over and over. 20 years. That gap had become a thicker, higher wall than Maya had ever imagined. The image in her head simply refused to take physical shape. Her fingertips trembled, and the angle of her scissors was always slightly off. Maya stopped the machine, dressed a mannequin in the prototype she had just sewn, took a step back, and let out a deep sigh. It's no good. It was too loose overall. It was just a frumpy piece of clothing designed only to hide a body shape. The fabric hung heavily, and rather than drawing out the wearer's charm, it made them look even older. In that instant, the familiar, cold voice replayed in the back of Maya's mind. Who would ever wear clothes made by a plain woman like you? In this world, image is everything. Fat and tacky. Her heart began to race with a sickly thud. Maya covered her ears with both hands and squeezed her eyes shut. The cursed words her husband had relentlessly poured over her clung to her and refused to let go. Can someone like me really make clothes? Was Kevin right? Could a woman who neglected her effort and threw away her femininity really create something beautiful that moves people's hearts? Panic and fear slowly backed Maya into a corner. The next morning, at Claire's studio, Maya spread out the prototypes she had stayed up all night finishing, but Claire's reaction was cold. Staring at the garments, Claire quietly shook her head. This won't work. Maya was at a loss for words. Is it too old-fashioned? It's not a matter of being old or new. These clothes are terrified. Claire pinched the shoulder of the prototype. You're so worried about hiding the changes in a body that you're using excess fabric to cover the whole person up. This is practically armor. It's clothing meant to protect oneself from the outside world and live quietly, out of sight. She hit the nail on the head. Maya's body went rigid. You're still bound by that man's words, aren't you? Claire's sharp observation made Maya gasp. You haven't escaped the terror of being laughed at by him as fat and tacky. You're designing only to hide flaws so you won't get hurt. That's not. Maya looked down, biting her lip. She couldn't argue back. She thought she had taken a new step forward, but her heart was still cowering in the corner of a room, terrified of Kevin's cold gaze. What we're making aren't clothes for running away. They aren't clothes for fighting, either. They're simply clothes that make a woman want to look in the mirror, fall in love with herself again, and step outside. Maya, until you forgive yourself, this brand will never be complete. Claire's words were strict, but filled with deep affection. However, the pressure weighing on Maya's back was nearing its absolute limit. Around the same time, at the downtown ad agency, Kevin had gathered his subordinates and was raising his voice. We're going to crush that project no matter what. Hitting the conference room whiteboard hard, Kevin had a manic look in his eyes. Humiliated and kicked out of Claire's studio, he was burning with fierce rage. He absolutely couldn't forgive Claire for rejecting his perfect advertising theory and telling him never to return. Claire's new brand launches in 3 months. We're going to counter it with a massive campaign for our client, the mega fast fashion brand. Kevin confidently laid out his plan. The target demographic is the same women in their 40s, but the models we use will be overwhelmingly young, beautiful 20-somethings. We'll push the message, if you want to be like this, buy these clothes and dominate the market using a massive budget across TV commercials and social media. Chloe, sitting next to him, looked at Kevin with absolute admiration. That's amazing, Kevin. If we do that, our campaign will definitely monopolize the conversation. Yeah, no one's going to pay attention to that soft, love-yourself old lady brand Claire is trying to make. Women in this world always bow down to youth and beauty. I'll prove it. Kevin's cruel laugh echoed in the conference room. He had no idea that his ex-wife was the mastermind behind Claire's brand. Driven entirely by his own ego, he was preparing to use the massive power of advertising to completely obliterate a small boutique brand. A few days later, Michelle visited Maya's apartment and gasped at the sight of the room. Scraps of fabric littered the floor, and Maya was slumped against the wall with dark circles under her eyes, looking completely drained. Maya, you should get some rest, Michelle said with concern, but Maya shook her head with hollow eyes. Maybe I really am useless. Her frail voice fell into the quiet room. Kevin was right. I did nothing for 20 years. I forgot to polish myself and just aged. There's no way I can make clothes that make someone shine. Oblivious to Kevin's large-scale sabotage plot, Maya was completely cornered by her own fear and lack of confidence. She was terrified of looking at fabric. She was even more terrified of looking at herself in the mirror. Maya. Michelle hugged her knees and could only silently rub the back of the trembling Maya. The overwhelming 20-year gap and the deep scars etched into her soul. With Kevin's malice closing in, Maya's path to rebirth seemed entirely shut. I can't do this anymore. I can't create anything. In the corner of the messy room, Maya covered her face with her hands and muttered weakly. The floor was scattered with the mutilated remains of fabric, fat and tacky. Who would wear clothes made by a woman like you? Kevin's mocking voice echoed in her head on a loop, making the hand holding her scissors shake. No matter how much she sketched, the result was always frumpy. Armor-like clothing meant only to hide a body. Watching her in silence, Michelle stood up and pulled a wrapped package out of the paper bag she had brought. Maya, look at this. What came out of the package was a high-quality dress in a muted, dusty blue. The moment Maya saw it, she gasped. That's what I made. Yes. Michelle lovingly pressed the dress to her chest. 20 years ago, when I gained a ton of weight from work stress, when nothing looked good on me and I cried that I hated going outside, you stayed up all night tailoring this dress for me. Back then, Michelle had feared looking in the mirror, just like Maya did now. Back then, you told me, you can't wear baggy clothes just to hide your curves. Show a little bit of the neckline and wrists, and if we use 3D draping to flow beautifully along your body's natural lines, you'll look absolutely stunning. Michelle looked straight into Maya's eyes. You were always a genius at drawing out the natural beauty a person possesses, rather than hiding their flaws. You've just been brainwashed by that man's words into forgetting your true power. Maya quickly looked up. Michelle took Maya's hand, gently wrapping her palms around it. Look at these hands. Rough from washing dishes, wrinkled with time. But these are the hands that made dinner every day, scrubbed the floors, and fought desperately to protect your family. You didn't throw away your womanhood. You loved your family and fought for them. These hands are absolutely not the hands of a lazy person. The tears Maya had been holding back burst forth, pouring down her face. The 20 years no one had acknowledged. The life that Kevin had scoffed at as lacking effort was, for the first time, validated. At that moment, something inside Maya finally clicked. That's right. I know the pain of women who have gained weight or seen their bodies change with age more intimately than anyone else. I know the despair of having a husband mock your appearance, becoming terrified of mirrors, losing confidence, and looking down at the ground. That experience is my ultimate secret weapon, one that young designers can never, ever replicate. I won't run away. Maya wiped her tears and stood up with renewed strength. She spread out a fresh piece of fabric and gripped her scissors with hands completely devoid of hesitation. She would no longer make giant armor to hide the body. She was going to create clothes that allowed wounded women to fall in love with themselves again and walk forward with their heads held high. Meanwhile, at the ad agency, Kevin was gazing in deep satisfaction at the final poster design for his massive campaign. The poster featured a slender, beautiful model in her 20s, wearing tight clothing and striking a pose that looked down at the camera. The tagline read, "Reclaim the woman you used to be. Perfect." Kevin let out a triumphant laugh. Middle-aged women look at these young, flawless models and desperately want to be like them. If we hammer their inferiority complexes, these clothes will sell like crazy. Chloe, standing next to him, clapped her hands with an adoring smile. "You're incredible, Kevin. You completely understand the psychology of the target demographic. Those clothes Claire's studio is making are probably just oversized potato sacks meant to hide fat anyway. Yeah. Clothes made by old women for old women will never sell. Women will always bow down to youth and beauty. This is going to be our total victory." Kevin firmly believed he would dominate the market and crush Claire entirely. His arrogant eyes never noticed the fatal counterattack creeping up right at his feet. A few days later, in the reception room of Claire's design studio, Maya stood quietly next to a mannequin wearing a completed garment. The moment Claire walked in and saw the dress, she lost her words and stopped in her tracks. It wasn't a lump of fabric meant to hide a body. The slight roundness of the shoulders unique to aging women, the inevitable thickness around the back and waist instead of violently constricting them, Maya had used the drape of the fabric and the magic of an exquisite cut to transform them into an astonishingly elegant and beautiful silhouette. The neckline was cleanly open, designed to instantly brighten the face. It was the exact moment Maya's rare, brilliant talent, dormant for 20 years, was fully resurrected. "Maya, this is..." Claire's voice trembled slightly. Maya looked straight into Claire's eyes and smiled peacefully. "I'm done making clothes for hiding." The fearful expression had completely vanished from Maya's face. "For 20 years, I put myself last. But that time was absolutely not a waste. Because I was deeply hurt, I finally realized I could make clothes that truly empathize with women who have lost their confidence just like I did." Claire slowly approached the mannequin and gently touched the high-quality fabric. "It's magnificent." A sure light resided in Claire's eyes. "With this, we can win." "No, we won't just win. We're going to flip the values of women everywhere upside down." Maya's counterattack was finally ready, but Kevin still knew nothing. He didn't know that the ex-wife he threw away for being fat and tacky had blossomed into a massive talent capable of destroying his entire world. Nor did he know how far his fate would tumble when these clothes finally hit the world. 3 months later, the massive ad campaign Kevin launched took over the city. Giant billboards on the Chicago transit stations, TV commercials, smartphone ads, everywhere you looked, a skinny, beautiful 20-something model was striking a confident pose. "Reclaim the woman you used to be." Kevin sat back proudly at his desk in the ad agency. "Look, Chloe, this is the overwhelming power of advertising." The first day's sales data showed a strong start, just as he predicted. "You're amazing, Kevin." Chloe stroked his ego with a sweet voice. "Women are panicking when they see the young models, rushing to buy the clothes. Your strategy is proven right. Nobody's going to remember that old lady brand Claire is making." Kevin drained his glass of water, intoxicated by the sweet taste of victory. He was the smartest in the room, and his ideas were always flawless. Throwing away his wife and securing a young woman meant his life was perfect. However, as a few days passed, a slight sense of unease began to mix into the air. A dark shadow fell over the women who had jumped at Kevin's campaign and bought the clothes. In a condo in Chicago, a woman in her 40s stood in front of the mirror wearing the clothes that had just arrived. It was a tight-fitting dress she had bought, believing she could become as beautiful as the model in the ad. But the reflection staring back at her was just an awkward, unflattering version of herself trying too hard to look young. Her stomach bulged, and the sleeves pinched her upper arms uncomfortably. Am I really completely past my prime? She burst into tears and ripped the clothes off. Kevin's advertising, instead of just selling clothes, ruthlessly stripped women of their self-confidence. I never want to wear this again. It hurts to look in the mirror. Inquiries for returns were slowly, but steadily, beginning to surge. At the exact same time, the new mature women's brand, spearheaded by Maya, quietly began sales. They didn't have the budget for massive ads like Kevin's. All they had was a newly launched website and modest posts on social media. At the studio, Michelle looked at the computer screen and muttered anxiously, "Kevin's campaign is huge. It's all over TV. Will anyone even find our clothes?" Claire crossed her arms and stared quietly at the monitor. But Maya smiled gently. There was no trace of her former fearful self. "It's going to be okay." Maya gently stroked one of her carefully tailored dresses. "These clothes aren't meant to make people buy out of panic. They'll absolutely reach the hearts of the people who truly need them." Maya had unshakable conviction. The tears she had shed and the pain of her 20 years were woven into these garments. They were clothes that a man who judged people entirely by their appearance could never, ever create. And that night, a single small post went up on social media. "Lately, it's been painful to look in the mirror. Nothing looked good on me, and I gave up, thinking I was just an old woman now. But when I put on clothes from this brand, I cried." Attached to the text was a photo from behind of a woman smiling happily, wearing the dress Maya had designed. "It doesn't just hide my fat, it makes me look beautiful. When I wear it, my posture naturally straightens. For the first time in forever, I wanted to put on makeup and go outside." At first, the post only got a few likes, but it was a small spark falling onto dry kindling. The next morning, I bought one too. It feels incredible. It's for women in their 40s, but it doesn't look old-fashioned at all. In fact, this is the most beautiful I've looked in years. I finally found clothes that affirm who I am, instead of just hiding my body. Voices of empathy chained together, one after another. "I want to wear it too. Where can I buy it?" Word of mouth spread like wildfire. Maya's brand inventory began dropping rapidly. "Maya, this is incredible!" Michelle cheered, and Claire nodded in deep satisfaction. Looking at the joyful voices of women lining the screen, Maya quietly wiped a tear. Her 20 years had not been a waste after all. On the other hand, a highly volatile atmosphere was brewing at Kevin's agency, Director, regarding the campaign merchandise. Return inquiries are skyrocketing. Hearing his subordinates report, Kevin clicked his tongue in annoyance. "What? It's the customer's fault for not knowing how to wear them. Just brush them off. More importantly, pump out more ads to agitate new buyers." Just then, Chloe let out a strained voice while staring at her tablet. "Kevin, look at this." Claire's brand is exploding on social media. "Everyone is praising their clothes," Kevin scoffed. "It's probably just fake reviews they bought." "It's some weak, no-name brand." Kevin swallowed his words and laughed it off. "Just leave it. It'll disappear soon." Kevin still didn't realize the gravity of the situation. He underestimated the powerful solidarity of the middle-aged women he had so thoroughly looked down upon, and the true, terrifying power of Maya's clothes that intimately understood their hearts. Kevin had no idea that this tiny spark would soon erupt into a massive inferno that would burn the ground right out from under him. 1 month later, the new brand Maya designed had caught fire through social media word of mouth and recorded a completely explosive hit. Awaiting restock and sold out in all colors lined the brand's website. Claire's studio was swamped from morning to night, handling orders and customer service calls. "Maya, this is huge!" Michelle rushed into the workroom, excitedly pointing at a laptop screen. "We just got an interview request from a major women's magazine, the savior brand for middle-aged women, uncovering the secret." Maya stopped the sewing machine where she was stitching a piece of fabric and widened her eyes. "An interview? Us?" Claire walked over quietly and placed a hand on Maya's shoulder. "It's a well-deserved evaluation. The clothes you made saved the hearts of countless women. Clothes not for hiding, but for loving the person you are today. This is proof that your message has undeniably reached the world." Maya felt her chest grow hot. For 20 years, she had lived quietly in her family's shadow. Unseen, unappreciated, mocked by her husband as overweight and frumpy, she had resigned herself to simply aging into oblivion. But now, something she had created with her own hands was giving a powerful push to strangers' backs and putting smiles on their faces. Suddenly, Maya looked at her own reflection in the studio's full-length mirror. The exhausted, frumpy old woman was no longer there. Her hair, neglected for years, was neatly trimmed, and had regained its natural shine. Her skin, which she had started moisturizing carefully, looked bright, and the slight touch of lipstick made her expression vibrant. More than anything, the clothes she was wearing were different. It was an elegant dress she had designed herself, softly following the lines of her body. By taking the time and love to care for herself, rather than someone else, a person could transform this much. Maya herself was the most surprised of all. Meanwhile, the conference room at Kevin's ad agency was suffocating under a heavy, funeral-like atmosphere. "What is the meaning of this, Director Foster?" The representative of their massive corporate client slammed his hand on the desk and stood up. "The result of this massive campaign is the worst return rate in our history. How do you plan to take responsibility?" Kevin dripped cold sweat, bowing frantically. "I'm deeply sorry, but our ad impressions hit record highs. What's the point of impressions if the customers leave the brand? We haven't stopped getting complaints saying, 'Wearing these clothes just makes me feel miserable.' Using young models to make middle-aged women feel insecure was a fundamentally flawed strategy." After the furious client stormed out of the room, Kevin aggressively loosened his tie and sank deep into his chair. "Damn it. Why? Why did my perfect strategy fail? Show them a good-looking young model and women will panic and buy clothes." That condescending rule of thumb had completely backfired. Just then, Chloe approached with a pale face, holding a tablet. "Kevin, this is bad. Look at this." Chloe handed him the tablet with shaking hands. It displayed a social media timeline completely flooded with the joyful voices of women wearing Maya's brand. Kevin snatched the tablet and scrolled in disbelief. "What the hell is this hype? This is that brand for old women that Claire's studio made, right? Yes. But it's selling explosively. It's even been featured on morning talk shows. All the customers from our campaign seem to be flocking over to them." Kevin stared intently at the clothing designs displayed on the screen. Even though women in their 40s and 50s were wearing them, every single garment looked stunningly sophisticated. There was absolutely no frumpiness or sense that they were trying to hide their bodies. The perfectly calculated necklines, the drape of the fabric, the elegant color palettes, they were masterclasses in design that drew out the wearer's dignity and made them shine from the inside out. Kevin gasped. "This is incredible." Even knowing it was Claire's brand, a genuine voice of admiration slipped out. "These aren't just clothes for old ladies. This is the work of a genius." Chloe tilted her head in confusion. "A genius? Yeah. They completely understand the target's insecurities and solve them with the highest level of design. Whoever did this has to be an incredibly sharp young designer." Kevin never in his wildest dreams imagined that the creator of these clothes was the ex-wife he had insulted as past her prime and discarded like trash. He leaned forward in excitement. "The young talent out there lately is insane. Where the hell did Claire find someone this skilled?" A cunning, entirely self-serving calculation began spinning in Kevin's head. "If things stay like this, my job is on the line. To win back the client's trust and save face as a director, I have to poach the lead designer of this viral brand over to my team. Chloe, find out who the lead designer for this brand is right now." "But Kevin, we're completely blacklisted by Claire's studio. Business has no room for emotions. With talent like this, if our agency offers massive money and incredible perks, they'll definitely bite." Kevin smiled a nasty smile. "I'll meet them directly and persuade them myself." Unaware that he was putting a noose around his own neck, Kevin hatched a reckless plan. That night, a message arrived on Kevin's smartphone. It was from Aaron Smith, the organizer for their high school reunion. "Hey, the reunion is next week. Since you're doing so well in the ad industry, we'd love to have you. Actually, the lead designer of that viral mature women's brand is coming too. We're having them say a few words as part of a special presentation." Kevin's eyes widened. "What? That genius designer is coming to my high school reunion?" Why they would attend his high school reunion was a mystery, but for Kevin, it was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. He would make contact directly, offer them a job like a savior, and steal them away. "My luck is finally turning. I really am a winner." Kevin laughed loudly alone in his dark apartment. He had absolutely zero imagination that Maya, the woman he had cut off purely based on her looks, would be the star of that very reunion. Meanwhile, in Maya's apartment, Michelle had forwarded the details of the reunion. "Maya, are you ready? It's finally next week." Maya set her smartphone on the table and looked at the dress hanging in her closet. It was a special piece she had designed from scratch and meticulously sewn just for this day. It lacked any flashy embellishments. but it was the dress that made the Maya of today look the most beautiful and dignified. Yes, I'm ready. Maya smiled quietly. It wasn't to get back at her husband. It wasn't to win against his young mistress. It was simply to walk proudly in the world as the true version of herself she had suppressed for 20 years. With only a few days left until the fateful reunion, cold, nervous sweat trickled down Kevin's forehead. Another canceled contract! Are you kidding me? Kevin's roar echoed through the ad agency office. Slamming the phone down, Kevin violently loosened his tie. The massive campaign he had launched with such overwhelming confidence had entirely backfired. The strategy of using young, beautiful models to trigger the insecurities of middle-aged women had generated fierce backlash and fatally damaged the fast fashion brand's image. Trust from their clients plummeted to the floor, and Kevin's position within the company was rapidly crumbling. Kevin, are you really going to be okay? Chloe asked from a nearby desk, her voice laced with anxiety. Until recently, the way Chloe looked at him was full of adoration and dependency toward an elite director. But now, her eyes were mixed with clear doubt and coldness. Did I board a sinking ship? Her calculating thoughts were practically visible on her face. Feeling irritated by her gaze, Kevin put on a brave front and scoffed. Of course I'm fine. It's just amateurs making noise. Besides, I have my next move. Kevin tapped his planner. Tomorrow's date read, High school reunion. Tomorrow, the lead designer of that viral brand is coming to the reunion. I'm going to talk to them directly and poach them for our agency. If I wave a massive check in front of them, a young designer will nod instantly. Then this whole situation flips back in our favor. Chloe gave a small, half-convinced nod. Kevin sank deeply into his chair to hide his panic. He was going to steal the brand from Claire, the woman who had looked down on him, and claim it as his own achievement. That was the only path to survival left for him. The following night, familiar faces gathered in the banquet hall of a luxury downtown Chicago hotel. A gorgeous buffet was laid out, and cheers and laughter echoed across the room. Kevin, wearing a finely tailored suit and holding a glass, stood in the center of the hall. Beside him was Chloe, wearing a skin-tight red dress. Wow, this hotel is amazing. But your classmates are all just old men and women, Kevin. Chloe giggled as she scanned the room. Kevin nodded proudly. Naturally, they all just get old, crushed by the daily grind. Men like me, who fight on the front lines and can walk around with a young, beautiful woman like you, are one in a million. The classmates were looking at Kevin and Chloe from a distance, whispering among themselves. Kevin took it as jealousy and bathed in the superiority. He had dumped his plain, fat wife and secured this glamorous life. My choice was right. He had to keep telling himself that, or the terror that the ground beneath his feet was crumbling would consume him. Aaron Smith, the organizer, approached. Kevin, glad you made it. And your +1 is… Yeah, this is my girlfriend, Chloe. But forget that, Aaron. What about that thing we talked about? Kevin leaned in, dispensing with the pleasantries. The lead designer of the viral brand. Are they here yet? Some young design genius, right? Aaron looked at Kevin's desperate eyes with a slightly puzzled expression, but he quickly broke into a quiet smile. Yeah, they've arrived. They're getting ready in the waiting room right now. Perfect. Introduce me first later. I have a massive business proposition for them. Business, huh? Aaron started to say something but closed his mouth. Well, it's fine. They'll be coming into the hall shortly for a greeting. You'll understand everything then. Satisfied with Aaron's words, Kevin nodded. Understand everything surely meant the designer would bow down to the overwhelming compensation package he was offering. Kevin adjusted his tie and kept his eyes glued to the grand double doors at the entrance. At the exact same time, in a quiet waiting room just outside the banquet hall, Maya stood in front of a mirror. It was the special dress she had designed from scratch and sewn herself. The deep, calming navy blue fabric beautifully wrapped around the slightly rounded lines of her shoulders, creating a flowing silhouette. She wasn't trying to force herself to look young. Yet, the dress radiated a quiet elegance and beauty that only comes from aging gracefully. Maya, are you ready? The door opened, and Michelle peeked in. Maya slowly turned around. There was not a shred of hesitation or fear in her expression. The woman who had been beaten down by her husband's words for 20 years was nowhere to be found. Yes. Maya smiled peacefully and took a small, deep breath. Let's go. Inside the banquet hall, Aaron held the microphone and addressed the attendees. Everyone, may I have your attention for a moment? The noisy hall gradually quieted down. Kevin pulled Chloe close by the waist and raised his glass from the front row table. A twisted smirk of total victory was plastered on his mouth. Tonight, we have a special guest. The lead designer of the brand everyone is talking about has joined us. Aaron's voice echoed through the speakers. Let's welcome them. Kevin took a deep breath. A young, talented designer. He would make this person owe him, crush Claire, and make his life shine brilliantly once again. Kevin stared at the heavy doors with eyes full of absolute confidence. The lights dimmed slightly, and a spotlight hit the grand entrance. The sound of the doors slowly opening echoed. Kevin took a step forward, ready to offer words of welcome. But he had no idea that the sight he was about to witness in the next few seconds would entirely shatter his flimsy pride from the ground up. The heavy hotel doors slowly swung open. The spotlight illuminated the entrance. The buzzing banquet hall fell completely silent, every eye fixed on the light. Kevin stood at the front table, a smirk on his face, glass in hand. Then, with quiet footsteps, a single woman walked out. Kevin's eyes widened slightly. The person who entered was not the flashy, youthful designer he had imagined. It was a woman around his own age, wearing a calm, elegant dress. There were no loud embellishments. Yet the dress made her body lines look astoundingly beautiful, the high-quality fabric swaying softly with every step. Her posture was perfectly straight, and her expression carried the peaceful dignity of someone who had deeply accepted herself. She wasn't armed with youth, but she possessed an overwhelming presence that commanded more attention than anyone else in the room. Beside Kevin, Chloe in her red dress scoffed. What? She's just an old lady. That plain woman is the lead designer? Kevin didn't answer. No, he couldn't answer. The glass in his hand began to tremble faintly. Kevin couldn't take his eyes off the woman. That face walking through the light. That walk. There was no way he could mistake her. It was the woman he had lived with every single day for 20 years, the woman he had looked down on and thrown away, telling her she was past her prime. Maya. A hoarse voice leaked from Kevin's mouth. His brain completely stopped working. Why are you here? Why do you look so confident? And above all, why are you so beautiful? At first, even the classmates in the room didn't realize who she was. It wasn't because she had lost weight. It wasn't because she was wearing heavy makeup. Her posture, her expression, her entire aura was completely different. The air of someone shrinking back, looking down in fear, had entirely vanished. The quiet confidence of someone who didn't treat herself like garbage radiated from her. But as she walked slowly to the center of the room, a wave of voices began to ripple through the crowd. Wait. No way. Maya? Is that Maya? She looks gorgeous. Voices of awe leaked from everywhere. No one could take their eyes off her. 20 years ago, when she went from fashion school to an apparel company, she shone brighter than anyone. Now, she stood there as a mature woman with an even deeper, more profound beauty. Aaron, the organizer, quietly grabbed the microphone again. Everyone, I'm sure you're surprised. His voice rang across the hall. Today, she came all the way here, especially as the lead designer of that viral mature women's brand. Aaron extended a hand toward Maya and clearly spoke her name. Please welcome Maya Foster. In that instant, the blood completely drained from Kevin's face. A dull, heavy ringing smashed through his head. His vision went white. The young genius talent he had praised and desperately wanted. The central figure of the brand that had utterly crushed his perfect ad campaign and pushed him to the brink of ruin, that was. The ex-wife he had laughed at and discarded for being fat and tacky? That's a lie. Kevin's legs wobbled. Chloe looked at Kevin's face in confusion. Kevin, what's wrong? You look pale. Did something happen with that old woman? Chloe still didn't realize the woman standing before them was Kevin's ex-wife. But Kevin couldn't even hear Chloe's voice. Prompted by Aaron, Maya stepped up to the microphone. She was only a few feet away from Kevin. Maya's gaze slowly swept across the room and finally stopped on Kevin, who was standing completely pale in the front row. Kevin held his breath. He braced himself to be looked down on with cold eyes, or glared at with hatred. But it was different. Maya's eyes were simply calm. There was not a shred of anger, sadness, or lingering attachment toward Kevin. It was the quiet, transparent gaze one gives a total stranger, or someone living in a completely different universe. For Kevin, that was more terrifying than any verbal abuse. It coldly declared that the wife he had dominated and looked down on for 20 years had completely moved to a place he could never reach. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Maya. Maya's calm, clear voice resonated through the hall. There was not a hint of the tremor she used to have when she constantly monitored Kevin's moods. I'm truly happy to see all of your familiar faces today. Just for a brief moment, please allow me to share the thoughts I put into the clothes I make. The hall erupted in thunderous applause. The classmates all stared at Maya with sparkling eyes. In the center of it all, Kevin alone stood frozen, dripping with cold sweat, entirely unable to move. All he could do was desperately grip the glass that was about to slip from his hand. The woman he threw away was not just a plain housewife. She was a woman possessing blinding talent and strength that he could never hope to touch. Kevin was now standing at the entrance to the greatest despair and humiliation of his life. Maya's quiet voice echoed in the hotel banquet hall. For 20 years, I stepped away from making clothes. Her fingers holding the microphone seemed to tremble slightly, but her voice held unshakable strength. To maintain my home and protect my life, I put myself last in everything. I became terrified of buying clothes or looking in the mirror, and all I could do was try to hide my changing body. I truly believed that my time as a woman was over. Listening from the front row, Kevin felt a suffocating tightness, as if his heart had been grabbed barehanded. Your time as a woman is over. Those were the exact words he had thrown at Maya. Cold sweat dripped from Kevin's forehead, and the ice in his glass clinked pathetically. Maya continued, but I realized something. Growing older, or the time spent wearing yourself out for your family, those are absolutely not things to be ashamed of. So I decided, I will not make clothes for hiding. I will make clothes that allow women to love themselves again, honoring the time they've lived. Quiet sobs began to echo from corners of the room. Female classmates were nodding deeply at Maya's words, pressing handkerchiefs to their eyes. They, too, were women who had sacrificed their time for someone else and sighed in front of mirrors. The brand I designed isn't about making clothes so you can be chosen by someone else. They're clothes for standing proudly on your own 2 feet and walking forward. Standing here in front of you today wearing this dress is my absolute greatest pride. As Maya bowed deeply, the room fell silent for a split second before erupting into deafening applause. Maya, you're incredible. I bought that dress too. Thank you so much. Classmates shouted praises, sending her warm smiles. In the center of that frenzy, Kevin alone was completely isolated. His mind was a chaotic mess. The brand he had mocked as sweet, naive clothes for old ladies. The brand he had tried to crush with his young model ads. It was created by his ex-wife. And she had taken the very curse words he threw at her fat and frumpy and turned them into her greatest weapon, winning over women everywhere. Kevin finally realized what a pathetic clown he was. He had marched into this room full of pride, planning to buy out the viral designer with massive cash and claim the glory for himself. Unaware, it was his ex-wife. He had laughed at the naive old lady clothes at Claire's studio, launched a massive ad campaign with his own hands, and spectacularly destroyed himself. Now he understood perfectly why his campaign had failed, and Maya's brand had exploded. He had looked down on women's pain and rubbed salt in their wounds. Maya had empathized with that pain and wrapped it in kindness. The winner had been decided from the very start. Kevin. Chloe, standing next to him, tugged at his sleeve with a trembling voice. When Kevin turned, Chloe's face was pale and drawn. That person? Maya Foster. That's your ex-wife, right? Kevin couldn't answer. His dry throat stuck together, and no voice came out. Chloe took a step back. You've got to be kidding me. You told me you dumped her because she was fat, frumpy, and embarrassing to look at. Chloe looked back and forth between the dazzling Maya on stage and herself. She was wearing a revealing, skin-tight red dress. Suddenly, the version of herself that had used youth as a weapon to bask in superiority next to Kevin felt incredibly cheap and terribly pathetic. The overwhelming elegance radiating from Maya, the kind only a woman who has weathered the storms of life possesses. Compared to that, Chloe realized she was just selling off her youth, something that would inevitably disappear with time. Chloe bit her lip, her face turning bright red. The classmates around them were also beginning to look at Kevin and Chloe with cold eyes. So the rumor that he dumped his wife for a younger woman is true. Who does he think he is? Throwing away a wonderful woman like her? The whispering voices pierced Kevin and Chloe without mercy. Unable to take it anymore, Chloe violently shook off Kevin's hand. You're a liar, Kevin! Your ex-wife is gorgeous and incredibly talented. You were the one who couldn't see anything at all. Chloe's words were the fatal blow to Kevin. Kevin's thin pride built entirely on judging people by their appearance, and inflating his own ego shattered into pieces. Even the young mistress who was supposed to be obedient was now looking down on him in disgust. He wanted to run away. He wanted to vanish from this hall immediately. But Kevin's feet felt like lead. He couldn't move an inch. As the applause continued, a woman stepped up next to Maya. She was a sophisticated, silver-haired woman in a sharp suit. Maya's former boss and current business partner, Claire Sterling. As Claire took the microphone, the atmosphere in the room tightened one more notch. "Everyone, I apologize for speaking after Maya's wonderful speech, but please allow me a few words." Claire's voice was calm, but her gaze shot straight at Kevin, who stood paralyzed in the front row. Kevin's shoulders jerked. It was the same Claire who had told him never to return to her design studio. She was being modest when she said she stepped away from making clothes for 20 years. But that time was absolutely not a blank space. Claire smiled gently at Maya, then looked out at the audience. The sight of Kevin, pale and trembling in the front row, was clearly in her vision. She wasn't just trying to make trendy clothes. She was the kind of person who thought about how the person wearing the clothes could love themselves again. Everyone in the hall was drawn into Claire's words. Kevin forgot to breathe, staring at the two women on stage. He wanted to run, but his feet felt nailed to the floor. Claire continued, "Why did her new brand receive so much support from so many women? It's because she didn't simply chase after youth. Those words fundamentally rejected the entire strategy of Kevin's massive ad campaign, the strategy of making women panic by using young, beautiful models. Getting older, your body changing, your face showing the exhaustion of working for your family and protecting your life. Society sometimes coldly laughs at that, saying let yourself go. They tell you it's shameful and needs to be hidden." Kevin flinched. It felt as if his past abuses were being exposed to the entire room. Cold sweat ran down his back. But Maya was different. She designed clothes to make women look beautiful, encompassing their age, their body changes, and their exhaustion. Clothes that make a woman who has given up on herself want to stand in front of the mirror again. That was Maya's vision. Kevin had completely lost his words. The clothes Maya designed weren't just for making skinny people look beautiful. They weren't clothes to forcefully hide wrinkles or sagging. They were clothes meant to gently embrace the backs of women who were hurt, who had lost their confidence, and who were afraid to look in mirrors. When he realized why Maya could make such clothes, the last drop of blood drained from his face. It was because Maya herself had known that exact pain for years. Her husband, Kevin, had constantly insulted her fat, frumpy, embarrassing to walk next to grinding her soul down every single day. Yet, without crying or getting angry, she put herself last for her family. Maya understood that unfathomable despair and pain deeper than anyone else. That is why she was able to create clothes that reached straight into the hearts of women suffering the same way. The cruel words he had continuously thrown at her, the body he had mocked, all of it had transformed into the unmatched depth of Maya's new work. The person who forged Maya's greatest weapon was none other than Kevin himself, through his own cruelty. Kevin felt dizzy. What exactly had he been looking at in his wife? Living in the same house for 20 years, eating the same meals, he had never once tried to understand how much pain she carried, or what kind of talent she was suppressing to serve their home. The person in the entire world who knew Maya the least was her own husband. At that moment, Michelle stepped quietly from the side of the stage. Standing next to Maya, she looked straight down at Kevin. She didn't hold a microphone, but in the dead silent hall, her voice rang out clearly. Maya didn't change to get back at her husband. Michelle's words pierced Kevin's chest like sharp blades. For 20 years, she just pushed herself and put herself last for the sake of others. Maya simply reclaimed the person she was always meant to be. Kevin desperately fought the urge to collapse to the floor. It wasn't even to get back at me. It wasn't to take revenge on her ex-husband, or to beat a younger mistress. In Maya's life, Kevin was nothing more than a relic of the past, not even worth fighting. She had simply returned to her true, magnificent self, and there was not a single inch of space left for Kevin in that reality. An even warmer, louder round of applause erupted from the crowd. Classmates stood up, sending unsparing praise to Maya. "Maya, you're so cool. I'll wear your clothes for the rest of my life." On the shining stage, Maya had reclaimed everything, loved and praised by so many. In stark contrast, Kevin was left entirely alone in the dark corner of the floor, ignored by everyone. Chloe, who was supposed to be beside him, had distanced herself and was looking at him with terribly cold eyes. "You're the absolute worst." Her gaze said it all. Believing he was the winner in life just because he had good looks and a young mistress, the ground beneath Kevin had completely caved in. All that remained was an overwhelming sense of defeat and the bottomless regret of having done something irreparable. Once the thunderous applause subsided, the atmosphere in the banquet hall transformed. Stepping down from the stage, Maya was instantly surrounded by a circle of classmates. "Maya, you look stunning. You're like a different person. I saw the article about the brand online. I was shocked to find out you launched it. You really have incredible talent. I bought that dress. I was a stay-at-home mom for so long and had no confidence. But when I wore it, for the first time in years, I didn't hate looking in the mirror. I went to the movies with my husband for the first time in 5 years. It really was like magic. Thank you." Warm words rained down on her one after another. Maya's expression in response wasn't the fearful, hesitant one from the past. It wasn't the face of a wife forcing a smile, constantly walking on eggshells so as not to anger someone. It was the beautiful smile of an independent woman, standing firmly on her own 2 feet, proud of the difficult path she had walked. From a distance, Kevin could only stand frozen and watch the scene unfold. Just an hour ago, he firmly believed he was the most successful person in this room. With a young, beautiful girlfriend, a prestigious title as an ad agency director, he looked down on his aging classmates from the bottom of his heart. But look at it now. No one was looking at Kevin. The status he desperately protected and the young girlfriend beside him might as well have been worthless. When he looked to his side, Chloe had completely distanced herself, giving him an icy glare. "Chloe." Kevin called out weakly, but Chloe let out a sigh and spoke with a voice like ice. "Kevin. I'm going home." "What?" "Wait. Let's go together. Just being near you makes me feel pathetic. You really didn't see anything about your wife, did you?" "The only thing I had over her was that I'm younger. But that's something that will eventually disappear with time anyway. Compared to that, look at how she shines." Chloe stared hard at Kevin's face. "To think you were the kind of man who couldn't see your own wife's true worth or her years of suffering. I was an idiot for following a hollow, empty man like you. You're the worst." Leaving only those words, Chloe turned her back on Kevin and walked quickly toward the exit. Kevin couldn't stop her. A relationship connected only by youth and superficial appearance was instantly blown away like a soap bubble before the overwhelming, authentic radiance Maya emitted. Having lost all his allies, Kevin stumbled toward the circle surrounding Maya. He couldn't believe it. He had to confirm it for himself. Was that really the same Maya he had insulted as fat and tacky every single day? Noticing Kevin's approach, the circle of classmates parted quickly. Cold, piercing glares stabbed into Kevin. A cowardly man who insulted his wife's appearance and threw her away for a younger woman. That rumor was already known to everyone in the hall. Maya turned and looked straight at Kevin. In her eyes, there was absolutely none of the fear or desperation she used to direct at him. They were as quiet and clear as a deep lake. "Maya." A hoarse voice leaked from Kevin's mouth. The woman standing before him was more beautiful and radiant than any version of her in his memories. Her dignified posture, her soft expression, her elegant presence elevated by the high-quality fabric. Kevin unconsciously spoke the words, "You got beautiful." That single phrase dropped into the quiet hall. How would the old Maya have reacted? Perhaps she would have thought all her suffering had finally paid off just from hearing Kevin say that, and shed tears. She might have clung to him, crying, thinking her husband had finally recognized her worth as a woman. But the wind blowing through Maya's heart was astonishingly calm. For the Maya of today, those words held no meaning whatsoever. Evaluation from a man who measures human worth entirely by appearance was something she didn't need a single millimeter of in her life anymore. Without changing her expression, Maya simply smiled peacefully. "Thank you." That was it. Her tone didn't rise. No joy leaked through. It was just a polite thank you, the same way one might respond to a stranger giving directions on the street. That overwhelming difference in temperature sent a violent chill through Kevin. "No, this isn't right. I praised you. I gave you the words you always wanted. So why are you looking at me from so far away?" Kevin reflexively took a step forward, as if to cling to her. "I didn't know." Kevin's voice shook pathetically. "I really didn't know you had this much talent, that you could make such amazing clothes." It was an excuse, an unsightly deflection of responsibility, as if saying he had been deceived. The moment she heard those words, Maya's smile vanished. She spoke quietly, but with distinct clarity. "It's not that you didn't know," Kevin gasped. Maya's straight gaze mercilessly pierced right through his shallow excuses. "You refused to look." Those words accurately impaled Kevin's vital spot. Refused to look. It was exactly right. How Maya scraped by to manage the budget every day. How she held back on buying her own clothes, and for whose sake she polished shoes. How exhausted she was from caring for his parents. And how much talent she had suppressed to serve their family. The opportunity to see it was right in front of him every single day for 20 years. But Kevin dismissed it all, calling her past her prime and lazy, completely abandoning any effort to look at her heart. Kevin could no longer argue back. He opened and closed his mouth like a fish, but no sound came out, as if he had forgotten how to speak. Standing there was a man completely broken, his pride and confidence smashed into dust. Maya didn't blame Kevin any further. She simply turned her heel quietly and returned to the warm circle of her classmates. Her back drifted further into a distant world Kevin could never reach. Never again would she turn around for his sake. With trembling legs, Kevin stared at Maya's back. The classmates in the hall surrounded her, laughing joyfully. The middle-aged men and women Kevin used to look down on weren't there. It was a warm, to mature space, where everyone walked their own paths and praised each other's time. And in the center of it, shining more beautifully than anyone, was the ex-wife he had thrown away purely based on her appearance. His own past words flashed back in Kevin's mind. Fat and tacky. Embarrassing to walk next to. Past your prime. What foolish, cruel things he had thrown at her every day. What stole a person's charm wasn't age or body type. It was the cold, heartless words he had been driving into his wife's heart. When he realized that, Kevin's pride completely collapsed with a loud crash. His massive failure at work, the loss of client trust, worsening the agency's performance, and hanging himself with his own ad campaign, and being abandoned by Chloe, whom he had chosen solely for her youth. Kevin had no status, no honor, no loved ones, nothing left. Maya. Before he knew it, Kevin had stumbled back toward Maya. The surrounding classmates parted with disgusted faces. Standing before Maya, Kevin threw away his pride and everything else, begging with a trembling voice. Please, can't we start over? The hall fell dead silent. Michelle, her eyes filled with fury, moved to block Kevin. But Maya gently placed a hand on Michelle's arm, quietly stopping her. Without running away, she looked straight into Kevin's eyes. Kevin was desperate. I was wrong. I was an absolute idiot. If you can change this much, I can change too. I changed? Maya asked quietly. Yeah. You got so beautiful you made this amazing clothing brand. You changed. So with the way you are now, we can. Before he could finish, Maya slowly but firmly shook her head. I didn't change, Kevin gasped. Maya looked at him with eyes full of pity and continued quietly. The me that was hidden by your words just went back to normal. Kevin couldn't say anything. With his mouth half open, all he could do was stare into the depths of Maya's eyes. For 20 years, you told me every single day that I was past my prime. Every time you did, my soul was chipped away a little more. I lost my confidence, and I became terrified of looking in the mirror. Maya's voice was never raised. That is exactly why it pierced Kevin's chest so deeply and heavily. The energy to choose clothes. The energy to fix my hair. You stole all of it from me. The reason I couldn't shine wasn't because I was lazy. It was because I was standing next to you. Because your words were slowly killing me every single day. Kevin's knees shook violently. He realized that no apology would ever work now. How cruelly the words he unleashed had murdered a person's heart. And the fact that she had come back to life the absolute second she left him, that reality completely rejected Kevin's very existence. He wanted to walk with a trophy wife, but the person stealing his wife's beauty was none other than himself. Just one more chance. Please. I realize your true worth now. I swear I'll treat you right from now on. Kevin tried to reach his hand out, clinging to her. But Maya didn't even try to dodge his hand. She just looked down at it quietly. There wasn't even hatred left. No anger, no sadness. Just the cold, clear eyes of someone looking at an artifact of a completely finished past. I will never return to the side of someone who treats me like garbage. Those words were Kevin's final sentence. He stood completely frozen. He was not permitted to take even one more step toward Maya. The convenient wife who just waited for him to come home in that dark, cold house, who smiled and forgave him no matter what he said she didn't exist anywhere in this world anymore. Warm applause poured from the classmates toward Maya once again. Well said, Maya. Your life is your own. Enveloped by the warm cheers of the crowd, Maya bowed deeply. Kevin desperately held back the urge to collapse right there and walk toward the exit, practically running away. The cold glares of his former classmates pierced his back. What an awful guy. He got exactly what he deserved. I heard he hurt Maya terribly, and then completely bombed at his own company too. The whispering voices refused to leave Kevin's ears. Opening the heavy doors and stepping outside the hotel, the cold night wind slapped Kevin's flushed face. There was no one beside him. In the home he was returning to, there were no belongings of Chloe's, and of course, none of Maya's warmth. Tomorrow, when he went to the office, the responsibility for his massive ad campaign failure awaited him. He would lose his title as director, the status he had built, and everything else. Kevin crouched down alone in the empty night streets. What came to his mind was Maya's smile from 20 years ago, right after they got married. Back then, she always talked happily about clothes, sparkling with life. The one who stole that, broke it, and ultimately lost it forever, was his own vanity and arrogance. Tears of regret ran down Kevin's cheeks and dropped onto the concrete. But no matter how much he cried, the hands of the clock would never turn back. Crushed by the weight and magnitude of what he had lost, Kevin sank to the bottom of the dark night. Stepping outside the hotel, the night wind was a bit chilly. Freed from the heat and noise of the reunion, Maya stopped, looked up at the night sky, and took a deep breath. She could feel the clear, fresh air flowing deep into her chest. It was long. It really had been a long time. 20 years of suppressing herself was by no means a short amount of time. Maya? Called from behind, she turned to see her best friend, Michelle, jogging toward her. Michelle fell in step beside Maya, letting out a mischievous laugh as she peeked into Maya's face. "Great job in there. Everyone in the hall was talking about your clothes. And that speech on stage? You were so confident and cool." "I was nervous." Maya shrugged slightly and smiled. "Just a bit. I was trying desperately to keep the hand holding the mic from shaking, but I'm glad I came." "Yeah. Did you see that guy's face? He was completely pale and couldn't even speak." "Serves him right." Michelle huffed. But Maya just looked peacefully out at the tree-lined night streets. "It's strange. I was so terrified of him every day, but now, Kevin's words don't reach me at all anymore. I really did escape from that place, didn't I?" Michelle narrowed her eyes gently and placed a hand on Maya's back. "Welcome back, Maya." At those words, Maya's eyes watered just a little. "I'm home, Michelle. I'm sorry for making you worry all this time. And thank you." The gentle laughter of the two women melted into the quiet Chicago night. Meanwhile, Kevin was sunk deep into the sofa in a dark, empty room. The condo he had fled back to from the reunion hall felt terribly large and cold. His former mistress, Chloe, had sent a short text immediately after leaving the venue. "We're done. You didn't see anything about your wife. Goodbye." Kevin tossed his smartphone onto the floor and covered his face with both hands. He couldn't argue back. He never had the words to argue back in the first place. Looking around the room, the flashy cushions and accessories Chloe had brought in were scattered carelessly. The warm space where Maya used to scrub the floors, prep his ironed shirts, and set out warm meals every day was no longer here. When he closed his eyes, the image of Maya arriving at the reunion hall vividly resurfaced. The beautiful figure of her wearing sophisticated clothes, walking proudly forward. He would never forget it for the rest of his life. The wife he had looked down on as past her prime and discarded purely on appearances. But in reality, the thing that had stolen her confidence and beauty was none other than his own words. The moment she was completely freed from his curses, she began to shine her brightest. Kevin had no choice but to bite down on the despair of watching that blinding light from a place he could never reach for the rest of his lonely life. A few months later, the brand Maya designed continued to generate a massive response nationwide, securing unshakable support from women. Every day, countless letters arrived at the small design studio. Along with Claire, Maya carefully read every single one. "Maya, listen to this one." Claire gently stroked a piece of stationery as she read aloud. "For years, looking in the mirror was agony. Nothing looked good on me, and I gave up, thinking I was just an old woman now. But when I put on these clothes, I cried. It doesn't hide my body, it makes me look beautiful. When I wear it, my posture straightens, and I put on makeup and went to the movies with my husband for the first time in years. It made me want to value myself again. Thank you so very much." Finishing the letter, Claire looked at Maya with satisfaction. Warm tears spilled from Maya's eyes. What she was making wasn't just lumps of fabric. They weren't clothes to make someone look expensive, or just to get compliments from others. They were clothes to help a woman cherish herself again and walk proudly in her own life. The pain of her 20 years had transformed into a light that saved someone else's heart. One bright morning, Maya woke up in her apartment. Opening the curtains, soft morning sunlight poured into the room. She opened the window, taking a deep breath of fresh air. Standing in the kitchen, she boiled water and poured coffee. As the rich aroma filled the room, Maya headed to the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror. The woman who used to cower at someone's cold words and degrade herself was no longer there. The few wrinkles around her eyes, the rounded lines of her cheeks from age, all of it was proof that she had lived her life with all her might. She opened her closet. From the colorful array of fabrics lined up inside, what would she wear today? What colors would she match? She wasn't choosing based on someone else's mood. She was choosing clothes for herself, making a careful breakfast for herself, putting on lipstick for herself, and smiling in front of the mirror. "All right," Maya said with a small, bright voice, slipped on her favorite shoes and opened the front door. Stepping outside, a pleasant breeze gently swayed her hair. She looked straight ahead and began to walk with firm, steady steps. No matter what happened from now on, she would never lose herself again. What steals a person's charm isn't age or body type. It's the heartless words thrown at them every day. And the moment a person decides to truly cherish themselves, no matter their age, they will quietly begin to shine once again.